Hello there, welcome to my review of the Rockford Files, Season 3, Episode 13. Sticks and stones may break your bones, but Waterbury will bury you. Written by David Chase and directed by Jerry London. The episode begins with a return to the airport, where Rocky has collected Jim after a short break. As they get to Jim's trailer, someone is marking the door to check for Jim's return. However, on this occasion, it's friend and fellow PI, Billy Merrihew. He wants to hire Jim because he's lost his licence after being caught breaking and entering. Billy is played by Cleavon Little, who is best known as Sheriff Bart in Blazing Saddles.
You've got to remember that these are just simple farmers. You know, morons.
He was hired to rescue a girl who was being beaten up by her boyfriend, and in his effort to save her was promptly arrested. With no sign of the girl or boyfriend, and the friend who hired him has also disappeared. Jim picks up the trail at a bar, where the bartender immediately calls a man also interested in the case. Back at Jim's trailer, he's accosted by the man the bartender called, but quickly gets the upper hand and finds out he's another PI, Vern St. Cloud, played by Simon Oakland, a character actor who I know best as Kolchak's boss in the Night Stalker series.
We are not amused. Kolchak, you are on it.
But whose most well-known role was as the Doctor at the end of Psycho.
I got the whole story. I got it from his mother.
He too has lost his licence after investigating a girl's disappearance and getting caught breaking and entering. Once is a misfortune, but twice is a pattern. And now Jim is on the real case.
He struck out with the manager just the way we did.
I talked to the switchboard operator.
So did I.
Yeah, but what you didn't check on was the outgoing calls.
This is a great setup for an episode that establishes what's going on pretty quickly and allows us to figure out a few things for ourselves, like Jim not being targeted because he was out of town. It could of course be the case that Jim was never going to be targeted because he's too smart to get caught. But while he is sharper than Billy and much sharper than Vern, the type of setup this was, and based on our past experience with the character, it makes it pretty clear that it could have easily been Jim in their situation. Which is likely why he's so willing to help, on top of the $200 a day, plus expenses.
Vern and I, we sort of decided to buddy up on this thing. If it's all right with you.
You tell him about the new setup, Merrihew?
Mm-hmm.
But the fee does not split. $200 a day apiece plus expenses.
Well,
Hey, wait a minute, that's not fair.
The back and forth between the three men is brilliant from the start and quickly establishes their character types and the pecking order. With Vern being a shady knucklehead who uses his muscles before he engages his brain, and Billy as a slightly more savvy operator, although not as clever as Jim, who is able to track down the real name of their joint client through a little conniving and a little charm.
The girl was about 5'4", blonde hair, blue eyes.
Oh, this is Miss Hammerhead.
Unfortunately, this gets him in deep as the man in the apartment the client was supposed to be in seems to be connected with law enforcement in some way. And Jim has to hightail it out of there, losing his tail in another unconventional way, on this occasion by getting arrested.
Hey, Mark Potemkin, what are you doing here, pal?
At the police station, Jim runs into another PI soon to be stripped of his licence, Marvin Potemkin, played by Val Bisoglio, who would later make a few appearances in David Chase's hit show The Sopranos. Marvin was busted for a slightly different crime, but had the exact same client as Billy and Vern, connecting all three men in a way none of them understand. After a meeting between all four men, Jim leaves with Billy to follow up on another lead, but Vern manages to convince Marvin to surveil the apartment Jim was scared off from, only to get nabbed by the guys who had scared Jim off. At this point in the episode, we have no idea what's going on, or why, other than three PIs have been set up to have their licenses revoked, and someone is keen to stop anyone else looking into it.
I mean, finding out that Tracy's going to
This plot is relatively thin at the moment, but it is moved along at a great pace thanks to the additional characters all bringing something fun to the table. But the way the plot progresses also feels very natural, with the clues Jim follows all making sense. His current lead brings him to Ted Clare and Susan Hanrahan at the offices of Waterbury Detective Agency. She fits the description of the PI's shared fake client, and at this point it's starting to make some sense why these other PIs have been targeted. Because they're competition. But surely no big company would squeeze their much smaller competition out and ruin people's lives just in order to monopolise the market, would they? Jim then goes to Marvin's office to brief him, and things take a turn for the darker, finding Marv dead, with Vern turning up moments later. They do a really clever thing here in order to shift the tone from the earlier light-heartedness to this darker twist, by switching to handheld cameras to follow Jim and Vern's reactions, changing the lighting to give it an almost noir feel, and allowing the actors' faces to sell the emotion with several close-ups.
What's he doing here?
It wasn't particularly common for shows at this time to do this stark change to change the tone, as generally handheld was used to increase tension, most often when one character is being stalked by another. So it really stands out as a brilliantly subtle and quite brave decision to shoot it in this way.
Looks like they surprised him.
The situation is made to look like a break-in, but Vern tells Jim and the cops that Marvin was supposed to be on a stakeout. Dennis doesn't believe that a reputable business like Waterburys would go out of their way to take out the small fry, but he's quickly proved very wrong when we see Ted Clare reporting to his boss, John LaPointe, and telling him that he was responsible for taking out the PIs.
No one could have foreseen that the situation would eventuate into a heart attack.
In order to help capture more of the market share.
A 20-point reduction in the small agency's share of the market is what we were after.
LaPointe thinks Jim might know too much and wants Claire to silence him. Meanwhile, Marvin's death is the tipping point for Jim, and he assembles Vern and Billy to help him get the evidence he needs to take Waterbury down. It's great to see him get tough with Waterburys here, and with Vern getting him to do the right thing, showing Jim's true sense of justice and his willingness to break the law in order to get the justice he thinks is deserved. The plan is to have Vern pretend to be a jumper at the Waterbury building, as a distraction for Billy and Jim to break in. They manage to get all the evidence they need and send the files to Dennis anonymously. They also get Claire and his goons arrested for murder and get a sort of kind of thank you from the irascible Vern.
Hey, fellas.
Don't take any wooden nickels.
This episode really hits the sweet spot of everything that makes the Rockford Files such a great show. It has the humour we've come to expect, but the way the show is able to move from that to the very serious business of the murder of one of Jim's friends is brilliantly done. Even better here than in earlier episodes like Say Goodbye to Jennifer, as we don't really get to know Marvin. But we know Jim likes and respects him and is upset and angered by his death, which means that we too are upset and angered by his death. Our sense of justice is further poked at when we find out how pointless and needless his death was, at the hands of some hired corporate goons to protect one of their detectives from a mild scandal. Then, in amongst this great plot and great character study, we also get some of the social commentary Chase would become famous for, as we see how a rich and powerful company uses nefarious means to crush the little people, who aren't in any way competition. They don't do it because they need to, but because they want to slightly increase their market share and because they think they can get away with it. Until Jim steps in to save the day. This all was coming at a time when big business was just starting to squash the mom and pop local businesses in the real world. And the show transposes those issues to this slightly less seen part of the world, while retaining the overall message. It's another triumph and another 5 out of 5 from me. Thank you. Goodbye.